This is the Arthur Aidala Power Hour with quintessential New Yorker, attorney Arthur Aidala, New York's go-to lawyer. He's here to share his stories from in the courtroom and around the city, with interviews from high-profile guests and everyday folks calling in to talk about everything from politics, lifestyle, health and wellness, and more. And now your host, making the case for the city he loves, attorney Arthur Aidala.
Thursday, everybody. It's Arthur Aidala. And I was down at the courthouse a little while ago in downtown Manhattan, Southern District of New York. We have a very cool show. I got Tariq Shepard and John Schell. They are the two NYPD veterans who will be coming on here talking about a little law and crime and buffer zones and strategic response groups. I'm going to have an attorney, Deborah Blum, on talking about a very interesting case I did work on for a time, and she worked on it. So, Deborah Blum, she is a lawyer, and I'm sorry, Deborah Blum, correct?
That is correct. And my father, Stanley Blum, was from Sheepshead Bay, but he went to Stuyvesant.
Oh, well, that's a real school. I can't even spell it, let alone try to pass the test to get into that. How are you, Deborah? I'm sorry I messed up your name. It has been such a crazy day. I've been in the office. I've been meeting with clients. I had to correct memos. I had to do a little television about Maduro. I had to go to the Southern District. I had to handle some stuff there. Ran here. Now I'm doing radio. So please forgive me.
No need to apologize.
So you are representing someone who I got to spend a little time with in Arizona, where he no longer resides. His name is Keith Raniere. He is now a convicted felon from the Eastern District of New York, if memory serves me correct. And he was sentenced to, I think, 120 years in what was known as the NXIVM sex cult case. And he's exhausted all of his appeals, and yet you're still leading a charge to basically declare that, number one, he was seized improperly, the evidence was seized improperly, he was in Mexico, and that he did not receive a fair trial. So with that little preview, Ms. Blum, why don't you tell us what your legal work has been for Keith Raniere?
Yeah, so I have done indirect appeals. So right now Ronald Sullivan and I just filed a Supreme Court writ of certiorari because the Second Circuit denied Keith's Rule 33, which was pending before Judge Garifas. And what was discovered post-conviction by 7 independent forensic experts really blows my mind. Like you, I've been a defense attorney for a long time. I've run around, hustle, bustle, and I've seen a lot of things. But this case is just so shocking. It's like an onion. The more you peel back, the more surprised I am by just how horrific his conviction is. So the Rule 33 focused on the fact that...
Well, just tell people what a Rule 33 is.
Okay, so a Rule 33 is a way to attack the conviction. You know, once you do your direct appeal, which most people are familiar with, there are other avenues of indirect collateral appeals or collateral attacks. So one of them is a Rule 33. Okay. And in it, we argue that there was newly discovered evidence. So that's basically what a Rule 33 is you're saying...
That goes back to the original trial judge, correct?
Yes, it does. So
it doesn't go to the... I'm just obviously explaining this for the listener. It doesn't go to the appellate court. It doesn't go to the Supreme Court of the United States. It goes back to the judge who tried the case. And you tell the judge, hey, judge, there's stuff we just found out that we couldn't find out in the past. We had due diligence, but we didn't find it. But now, through no fault of our own, it just popped up. And this guy deserves a new trial, correct?
I forget when I'm speaking with you that not everybody knows these things. You described it perfectly and succinctly. Yes, exactly. That in and of itself, the fact that it goes back to the same trial judge should alarm people, because oftentimes people who are convicted have issues with their trial judge. And one of the things that we focused on in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals when we went there to appeal the Rule 33 denial was the fact that the judge is biased against Keith Raniere, even to the point where media that was not favorable to him said, quote, "It was one of the most bizarre moments in court they'd ever seen," about the judge publicly mocking Mr. Raniere's defense counsel for requesting a brief adjournment to attend a mentor's shiva, which is when somebody passes away in the Jewish religion. After you have their burial, you sit shiva and people come over. It's similar to a wake, but it's in your home. And the judge threatened him with arrest. And that was all reported by Vanity Fair. That was during the restitution hearing. The judge really has been great to me as a person and granting adjournments due to personal matters, but in terms of how he's been to my client, it's the extreme opposite. He really acted pretty egregiously. Using the word pretty is probably not appropriate, egregiously during the trial, during the restitution hearing. So we made this motion to recuse the judge, and the circuit said, no way. And instead of just saying no way, they applauded the judge. They commended Judge Garifas for handling, quote, the 7-year litigation with skill, patience, and restraint. And that's just completely laughable that the Second Circuit said that, because we uncovered post-conviction independent forensic experts, 4 former members of the FBI, the worst government tampering they'd ever seen in their combined experience. And one of those things was the government and prosecution concealing and withholding, not turning over, despite appropriate demands for it at trial, digital evidence. So I can get into that, but it's, as well as leaving people off of the chain of custody. And both courts barely touched upon those 2 facts, which, you can tell your viewers that that's a really big deal.
Yeah, and I know some of this had to do with the photographic evidence, correct, that led to a much more enhanced sentence. Look, I will just tell you, Deborah, my experience, I've been to many prisons, jails in my career. When I went out there to Arizona, knowing I was going to be leaving the penitentiary, I was still nervous. Not to meet Keith Raniere, who, if you don't know who Keith Raniere is, you'd think he's Hannibal Lecter.
Totally.
And then you meet him, and he's like this small, diminutive guy, who's calm and well-spoken, and, he just, whatever. He's like, I'm charged with kidnapping and keeping people against their will. He goes, we lived in a place where there were no locks on the door. He's like, anybody could have walked in and out. It was a very interesting experience. But what you're experiencing, Deborah, what you're describing, people have to understand it's not atypical. It is typical. When someone gets convicted, especially in federal court, I think for a criminal defendant, the likelihood of a reversal it's in the teens, so like 82% of the times it's affirmed. And then if you want to try to get any extra relief, I think it is so ridiculous that it goes back to the trial judge. Another federal judge, even if it's of simultaneous jurisdiction, concurrent jurisdiction, meaning the same level of judge, I think should be the one to look at it and say, well, you know what? Or if it's an Eastern District case, give it to someone in the Southern District, because it's someone who they're not having lunch with every day, who they don't have to say, like, hey, dude, I think you messed up.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what our country is built on, checks and balances. But what I've learned in doing this post-conviction work is that you're screwed if you're convicted. It's that simple. You have a direct appeal, and if your trial counsel doesn't raise certain objections at trial, you've basically waived your rights to bring those up post-conviction. And then there are time limitations when civil litigants, due to something called fraud on the court, have a greater ability to overturn the judgment in their case than a criminal defendant that was convicted due to government fraud on the court.
Well, I will tell you, the reason why I jumped so high when Judge Kamens called me and said that we won the Harvey Weinstein appeal is because, statistically speaking, that was just such an uphill. If his name was Harvey Jones, it was an uphill battle because what you just said, right, is like, after conviction, it's so hard to get a reversal. But then when you have someone with such notoriety, to find the judges to have the intestinal fortitude to say, yep, we know, 12 jurors spent their lives and they listened to the evidence and they came to this verdict, but they listened to evidence that they should not have. It takes a lot of chutzpah to do that and say we're going to do it all over again. But, I will tell you, Deborah, I haven't jumped that high since I passed the bar exam in 1992. So anything else fun that you're working on you want to talk about in the last 2 minutes I got left?
Well, I just want to say that's an incredible win, and Judge Kamens in his book, New York Search and Seizure, definitely got me through my legal aid days and
it's a
thereafter.
Page turner. It's a page turner. It's a real thriller, New York Search and Seizure by Barry Kamens, yes.
It really is.
I'm joking, folks. It's a legal textbook about when the police can stop you, when they could do, it's a very, very important. It is a tremendously important book. It goes back to Keith Raniere. They went and grabbed him in another country and without a warrant. And what were they allowed to do? And does an American in another country still have American rights? And yes, what Judge Kamens does is very important.
I want to thank you for having me on to talk about this case. Mainstream media is totally covering this up. Laura Loomer has begun doing a lot of tweets about this, and since then, New York Times, Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, People magazine, Fox Radio, New York Post, The Variety, The Guardian, they've all published the salacious narrative that he was going to be like Hannibal Lecter. So I really want to call out the media to accurately cover this case. I was a journalist. When I was a journalist, I would fact check. I would do my due diligence. That's what they're supposed to do, and they're completely ignoring the fact that we've uncovered this extreme tampering, government fraud.
The bottom line, Deborah, is the sex cult part of it, where, there were all these women and they were in this house and they were cooking and cleaning and fooling around with him. And, that's a lot more sexy than, the evidence was presented that should not have been presented, even if you have former FBI agents saying this is the most egregious violation of the United States Constitution we've ever seen in our career. But keep fighting the good fight, Deborah, because what people have to understand is when we win these little cases / big cases, it's a win for everyone. I mean, the Harvey Weinstein case, about what evidence people can hear, forget about how it affected Harvey Weinstein. It now is the law of New York State, where, you can't just throw a whole bunch of witnesses on the stand if you're not charged with those crimes just to taint a jury to obtain a conviction. So you keep fighting.
Thank you. I will. And congrats on that. And I really hope that we are victorious here because he deserves it.
All right, Deborah Blum, criminal defense attorney, fighting for those who, some people don't want to be bothered with, don't want to fight with.